Hello and welcome. Has South Africa's new president got what it takes to handle the issues tearing apart his country? Anger over the lack of basic services and continuing poverty 15 years after the end of apartheid has boiled over into violent protests and large-scale labour strikes. 150,000 municipal workers walked off the job on Monday, demanding higher wages to cope with soaring inflation, and other labour unions are threatening to follow suit. Thousands of demonstrators marched through major cities like Johannesburg and Cape Town, and several people were injured in Polokwane when police fired rubber bullets into a crowd of demonstrating workers. The labour strikes follow angry conflicts between residents and the police in several townships last week over the lack of food, jobs, healthcare, sanitation and housing in what is the middle of winter there. Just a few months into his first term, President Jacob Zuma faces a critical test of his leadership. The African National Congress leader swept into office on a campaign promise to end poverty, but his options are limited, with Africa's largest economy struggling through its first recession in 17 years.
There can be no justification for violence, looting and destruction of property, or attacks on foreign nationals residing in our country. The law enforcement agencies will continue to act swiftly and to take action against all who break the law.
Some observers also worry that the current turmoil could spill over into xenophobic violence similar to that which hit South Africa last year. And on top of that, Mr. Zuma has just 1 year to fix the problem before thousands of World Cup football fans descend on South Africa, the first time the global sports spectacular has been held on that continent. On today's programme, we look at the crisis and ask what can be done to improve living conditions for the people of Africa's largest economy. Remember, you can join our conversation with your questions and comments. Log on to livestation.com/AJE, enter the chat room and take part, and we welcome your phone calls on the show as well. Joining me from Johannesburg to discuss the issues is Lebogang Mokoena, a political columnist and researcher for the Centre for Political Studies, specialising in poverty and youth development issues. And from Cape Town, we're joined by Ferial Hafaji, the new editor-in-chief of Johannesburg City Press and formerly the editor of The Mail and Guardian. She was the first non-white woman editor of a major newspaper in South Africa. Thank you both for joining us today. And Lebogang, if I could start with you and ask, there have been a number of protests in the past on economic issues in South Africa. Why is it that Jacob Zuma should be worried in particular this time?
Well, I think on the one hand, the electorate has had a huge expectation about what the government is capable of delivering. But also people are saying that it's been 15 years of waiting, and that their time of waiting has not just been since the election now in April, it spans since 1994. The biggest worry is really understanding how the process of reforming local government in South Africa has not necessarily translated into a more effective and efficient grassroots governance structure that fully represents the interests of the poor and that delivers on the promises that the government has made. So part of the big challenge is to understand how the president will be able to address some of the really deep-seated shortcomings about local government institutions, which are the ones that are closest to the people and the ones that have been charged with delivering services.
Lebogang, what is the key issue that the demonstrators are concerned with on this occasion? What one single factor, if anything, is dominating their concern?
Well, I mean, it's very difficult to say, because when you've looked at some of the different locations where I can't hear anything.
Keep going. That's all right.
Okay. The different locations where we've seen the protests, it has been in very diverse circumstances, although some of the issues have resonated across the board. It's been issues around sanitation, healthcare. The unemployed are having a very concerted voice to say that, well, we've been waiting for jobs and now we think that it's up to the government to provide us with a basic income grant. So the issues are diverse, although to a large extent they boil down to the socio-economic condition of the majority of South Africans who 15 years down the line are feeling that the government has not adequately addressed some of their issues and some of their material conditions and their concerns that are related to that.
Well, Ferial Hafaji, let me bring you in here from Cape Town, and thank you for joining us, and ask you, President Zuma campaigned on a promise to end poverty and create 500,000 jobs, a fairly ambitious promise. How is he going to be able to do this considering the current economic situation? And if he fails to do it, how does he explain that to his voters?
I should hate Riz to be in President Jacob Zuma's shoes at the moment. He came to power on a ticket that promised itself to be a man of the people, that he would be located among communities, and I think in that wave he created enormous expectations. So last Wednesday, for the first time ever in my country, I saw people going, unemployed people, raiding shops and just starting to eat because they said they were hungry. So not to excuse the lawlessness of it, but I think there's a degree of desperation that doesn't often enough make itself onto the top of bulletins or into newspapers. And how President Zuma is going to do this, facing our worst ever recession in 17 years, a budget deficit that's higher than it's been for the past few years. It's indeed going to be a very, very tough job for him. But if you look at what people are saying, one of the people we interviewed last week said, our mayor is just so useless. Ours is a fairly middle-income country, and often it's questions of efficiency and mayors not doing the things which they're meant to do that might bring some sort of relief.
Well, Farial, there's a question that came in from Facebook, our Facebook page, from a viewer in Nigeria. Malam Ibrahim Gumel wrote in saying, people looking at the South African recession and expecting Zuma to work magic. He has just been in power for a couple of months. It will take a while and some patience to fix it, but no one seems to have that patience these days. So is it fair to blame him when he's been in office for just a few months?
Not at all. He hasn't even had the usual 100-day honeymoon. But this, remember, isn't a change of administration. It's not a different party. It's the same party that's been in power since '94. And like Lebogang says, for many, many South Africans, the goodies of liberation just not coming through at all. If you look at some of the statistics, 1 in 2 South Africans is officially regarded as poor. And just drilling down into some of the earnings of ordinary working class families, comes out to just about, for 30% of them, is about $300 per month, which isn't enough at all.
Okay, let me ask you, Farial, a question that came in on Facebook then from Chukwudi Dioka, who says, does Zuma have what it takes to lead South Africa out of the woods? I have my doubts. So in your experience or in your view, how experienced and well-equipped is President Zuma and his government for dealing with the issues?
Well, obviously, South Africans in our April election placed great faith in him. He came to office on an overwhelming majority. Personally, I think that he's constructed a cabinet that's going to be incredibly hard to work with, Riz, because it includes people of such different stripes that I think they might end up fighting each other rather than dealing with these very urgent issues. But one hopes that with the wake-up call that they've had, we've had protests in 8 of our 9 provinces, that this will focus their minds on the very, very basics of a decent life. And that means social grants, better social welfare net, getting those public works up and running, and really focusing on those issues rather than having silly little ideological battles as we have been doing. In the past weeks, we've been talking about nationalization again, when that really isn't the issue, like our Nigerian colleague points out.
Well, Farial and Lebogang, I'm going to ask you both to stand by. We've got to take a short break. As we pause, let me remind you, our viewers, you can join the conversation with your questions and comments by logging on to livestation.com and entering the chat room. You can see the debate taking place there right now. We'll be right back.